Welcome back to another edition of 8 News Then here on 8 News Now. I'm John Langlers, who look back at the history of Southern Nevada on and off the Strip. And today we are talking about the start of the Mirage, which opened back in 1989 on Las Vegas Boulevard and is now under reconstruction of sorts. We're here with Alan Feldman, who is now at UNLV in the International Gaming Institute. But of course, you were at the Mirage from day one at Day one. Thanks for coming in to talk about an important part of Las Vegas history.
It's a pleasure and frankly a joy to go through some of those memories.
Yes, we're dusting off the old Polaroids to look back at the past.
In 1989, the guests were curious and excitement was everywhere as the Mirage was about to open.
When we opened the switchboard, the mass of calls was so huge that the computer at the switchboard just went, and stopped.
The Mirage boasted a fabulous facade, complete with a volcano.
We're gonna check the pussycats in.
Plus, Mirage owner Steve Wynn managed to steal Siegfried and Roy and their cats from the stardust. Robert Folk, known by all just as Folk, was there on day one when Steve Wynn opened the doors for the first time.
You and your family, come on back and see us, all right? And he said, you can let them in now. And it was like the running of the bulls. I mean, people were just coming in from everywhere.
They had no idea what to expect inside. In fact, no one did. Steve Wynn kept the whole facade a secret for months, deepening the mystery surrounding the first ever mega resort.
25 to 26 years ago, as people were writing about the Mirage, there were a couple of really great stories about what a horrifying failure this was going to be.
Alan Feldman says 25 years ago, no one understood the concept. Instead of slot machines, an elaborate display of trees and dolphins would greet guests. This was a first ever for Las Vegas, and it showed guests that it wasn't just a casino you'd find inside. Initially, many people didn't believe this was the future.
It was never going to work, overbuilt, no one was going to like the place.
Feldman says Wynn and other major power players had already realized that travelers widely weren't looking only to gamble, and they needed to build a hotel to accommodate that.
We've seen these major, really tectonic shifts in how the business model works, and it all started here.
Now, almost every resort on the Strip follows this concept, building out the casinos with beautiful displays, shopping, and restaurants. But Folk says one thing has not changed.
Our business that we're in is dealing with people. Take the people away, what do you have? They're going to Rick's Restoration. Let's get the Queen in first. I'm one of those people who can actually say, I love my job. How many people you know that can really say that?
And 25 years after its opening, he, along with hundreds of thousands of guests, still loves what the Mirage has to offer.
So overall, let's just first and foremost talk about your position at the Mirage at the time and how you were involved as that property opened.
I started as a consultant. I was working for a PR firm in LA called Hill & Knowlton. We were hired just a couple of months before the opening because the prior agency had been let go. So we only had a few weeks to sort of get up to speed. But we did, and the opening was successful. And just a couple of months after that, Steve Wynn offered me a position as Vice President of Public Relations, and that started a 30-year career in the company.
What was the property like when you walked into that scene? Obviously, you hadn't opened yet,
right?
But when you were on property for the first time as the site was under construction, what was the atmosphere around not only Steve Wynn and his ex-wife and the management, but the city itself?
Wow. I didn't know the city well enough to be able to tell you what the city was like because I was a bit of an interloper coming from Los Angeles as I did. But I can tell you that walking into the Mirage for the first time, with all of the plywood still covering carpet and the tile and the marble everywhere and not all the slot machines in and some of the roof panels still hanging around, it was instantly, in its own way, unrecognizable. Because it looked nothing like anything else on the Strip. And one of the things that I had done early on in my time here was I walked up and down the Strip. I wanted to see the other places and try to get an understanding of what was there. And I'll never forget that one of the things that struck me was how often slot machines were basically on the sidewalk. Like if you went past the Flamingo or Harrah's, the doors were open, the walls were open, and they went from sidewalk, you could step inside, 2 feet later you'd be in a machine. And you could hear it. You know, it was very much part of the sound of the Strip. So to walk into the Mirage and not see anything but rainforest for the first few minutes was a stunning departure, to say nothing of the fact that it was set off of the Strip so far.
Sort of a sense of occasion walking into the Mirage versus some of the properties at that time.
A sense of experience, of occasion, of discovery. You know, one of the things that was built into the design in having that volcano out front, which, by the way, was never intended as a volcano. That only happened later.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
But one of the ideas was that if you saw that and you couldn't quite see the entrance, because don't forget that driveway rose up about 20 feet before the entrance, so it was a little bit mysterious. And that was the idea. The idea was that if the volcano could be outside, what on earth is on the inside? And it then had to deliver, and it did with the rainforest. And then it had to deliver again with a complete architecture and design program that was consistent, that we used to say the property was in costume, right? The whole thing integrated into this experience of being in the tropics.
And we'll talk about a little bit more of what was in the resort as it opened in a few seconds. But I think we should touch on also what you also hinted at a second ago, what Las Vegas and the Strip specifically was like at that time. We're talking 1989, late 80s here. There were already some themed resorts at the time. Caesar's Palace obviously had a theme to it. Circus still has a theme to it, and so does Caesar's, I guess.
Yeah.
You kind of hinted at this, but what made the Mirage stand out and be so different amidst the rest of Las Vegas Boulevard at that time?
It stood out and was different in many ways, some of which were easily visible to visitors, others which related to the business.
More than just the volcano and the dolphins and the lions.
Yeah, I mean, so to begin with, you're right. There were technically two themed hotels, both, no doubt, I mean, no coincidence, designed by the same guy, Jay Sarno, who designed Caesar's, and then after he lost control of that, sold it, went up the Strip and created Circus. The thing about those places is that there was something almost a tad superficial about them. And no matter what, from the business perspective, and this was true throughout Las Vegas, everything was about gaming. Gaming was everything. In the 70s, 80s, 60s, for sure, 70s and 80s, even though some of the other elements were beginning to grow a little bit, it was still all about the casino. And the casino drove 75% of the revenue. Today, as you go up and down the Strip, it's almost the exact inverse. Now, just so we're being clear, gaming revenue has not gone down. It has gone up consistently over the last 35 years. But the business model changed, and that's what the Mirage did, is it took the business model and said, no, we can be doing this differently. We don't need to give away the rooms just to get casino revenue. We don't need to give away food just to get casino revenue. That we can do this in a way where everything works together. Everything is integrated, both from a visitor point of view, but also from a business point of view.
I also get the impression that, at that time in Las Vegas, before the Mirage opened, Caesars was known for its boxing matches and sporting events in the empty parking lot that's now the Forum Shops for the most part. There were other events and entertainment, the Rat Pack, and all. There were ways to draw consumers into the properties. But the Mirage kind of, it seemed like, turned that up to 11 to some extent, but also did it in a different way. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that is a fair assessment. And I think it's always important to remember that the Mirage didn't invent anything particularly new. It was how it was all presented. So there were conventions in town. The Mirage didn't invent conventions. There were sporting events, and there was entertainment. They didn't invent that. Restaurants, didn't invent that. So in all of the kind of the component elements that went into the Mirage, they existed in this market in one form or another. But what no one had done was say, you know what, how do we strengthen all of them by juxtaposing them against one another? How do we strengthen conventions by having the right entertainment in order to build on the convention? How do we strengthen entertainment? by having enough rooms available so that we can sell them when the entertainment comes in. And then Siegfried and Roy, which was a master stroke. And it's hard now today to understand the impact they had, but the reality was that in Las Vegas, entertainment was amazing. Entertainment was fabulous. But entertainment almost always involved a performer, a spotlight, a microphone, and a stool. And it doesn't mean that there were no shows with any sort of theatrics to them. There were. But what Siegfried and Roy did was take it to a completely different level.
And they'd been in Vegas already.
They had an unbelievably successful run at the Frontier. Yeah. But even that was in its own way very Las Vegas. Lots of sequins, topless dancers, with the feather hats. And it wasn't theatrical. It didn't tell a story. And that was part of what they wanted to do. They wanted to create a real show, a real piece of entertainment that would be, in its own way, the destination. And so for many years, people were coming to the Mirage to see Siegfried and Roy. Yeah. They were like the in-house reason that people came. And then on top of that, we would add big conventions, sporting events, and other activities.
You're watching 8 News Then, by the way. I'm speaking with Alan Feldman, now at UNLV, but formerly for decades with the Mirage. And we're talking about the effect of the Mirage on Las Vegas Boulevard and how it helped sort of reinvent the strip that we kind of see today. You can't talk about the Mirage, obviously, without Steve Wynn. Mm-hmm. And he was, of course, running the show. And his ex-wife, Elaine, had a helping hand as well in the design and the architecture. How were they involved in the design and the vision of the property? And who else was also there to guide where that property went and how it became what it became?
So I think one of the fallacies of history about the Mirage is this idea that it was all Steve Wynn. And there's no question about Steve's influence. There was no question about his vision for quality, for experience. But then he hired unbelievably skilled people around him. The Mirage wouldn't be the Mirage without Roger Thomas, who did all of the interiors, every bit of the interior design, along with his partner, Jane Radoff. It wouldn't be the Mirage without Joel Bergman, who was the architect, who created numerous properties. It wouldn't be the Mirage without the great David Hersey, a Tony award-winning and BAFTA award-winning lighting designer, who one day, as he was lighting the hotel, because Steve wanted it to be a theatrical experience, so he hires this great lighting designer. And David one day just sort of says very casually, wouldn't it be, I think he said cheeky, wouldn't it be cheeky if that were a volcanic experience? Speaking of the waterfall that was that was all it was intended to be, was a waterfall. And he just sort of said it in passing. And the Atlantia Design Group, which was our in-house design company, went out and figured out how to make it a volcano. And in fact, they did a test first, a scale test. I think it was about 1/10 the size, that ended up sitting on the south side of the property for many, 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 many years. It was only taken out probably in the final decade of the Mirage.
It's such an interesting addition to the property. As I was looking back at it, I'm sure you can speak to it, there were so many engineering and technological challenges of that iconic volcano at the Mirage. It's not as simple as just putting a bunch of fire right by water, and usually those two don't mix.
Yeah. Think about
that. But also,
that for a minute.
there's it's gas, right? There's the odor from the gas that creates the fire. You've got palm trees all over the place. It was quite the remarkable invention to add to the strip. Nothing was like it anywhere in Las Vegas.
So one of the things we learned, these are the things you don't know until you set up. Because, by the way, if you decide to build a volcano, you can't just go online and go, volcanoes are us. Or,
it had crossed my mind, but Best Buy wasn't having any deals.
Ernie's
Black
Volcanoes
Friday
doesn't exist. But some engineers got together and, among other things, found out that the smell that we're accustomed to in gas is added. There isn't a smell to gas. That's added, and it gives it that.
So you know when.
So you know right away it's unpleasant, and you know what it is. So creating a gas that doesn't have any odor, that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was, how do you actually create fire that appears to be on water when those two absolutely don't mix?
Yeah.
And it had to do with the pressure that was in the line. You know, it was just basic engineering. But eventually they got it. And that's the reason they built the model. And the model worked, and the model was very impressive. And at one point, Steve turned to his brother Kenny, who was the head of Atlantean Design, and he said, "How much did this cost?" And Kenny kind of sheepishly said, I don't know the exact number, we'll just say $6 million. It was a big number. And Steve had no idea that it was that expensive. He said, well, we got to keep this. I mean, let's use it. Find a place for it. And that's how it ended up along. There was originally a moving walkway on the south side of the Mirage, and that was placed there as the decor. And once in a while, people would look at it and kind of think, that looks a lot.
Yeah. Is that what we came all the way from Omaha for? Was to see that little thing? Oh, no, there's the big one over there. Yeah.
Exactly.
So finally, it's opening day, right? 1989, the Mirage opens on the Strip. I went back and watched some stories from when it opened, and it was quite the showcase. What do you remember about the day the Mirage opened?
I think that the most significant memory that I have is that right up until we opened the doors, we didn't really know if it was going to work. We all thought it would. We were all very confident in what it was. But, you know, I think about a piano. If you've just built a piano, brand new piano off of the assembly line, and it's placed before you, is it a really gorgeous instrument, or is it a place to hang a coat? You know, and it depends on who sits down and how they experience it, and then how you experience it once they're there. We didn't know if this was going to be the hit we thought it would be. So there was a certain amount of confidence that was expressed because we did have investors. Wall Street wanted to know that this was going to work. But the reality was, until the public got into it, we wouldn't know. And there was this incredible moment where the entire building, other than employees, is empty. Yeah. And we've gone through the opening. We've welcomed Siegfried and Roy. We've welcomed the tiger. We've checked them in. We brought them over to the habitat and let the tigers into the habitat. And then Steve grabbed a walkie-talkie from the head of security and said, okay, Leo, let him in. None of us knew that the streets were packed, that traffic had stopped. None of us could see it. It was way down on the street. We were up inside.
One of the ideas of a casino is you're not supposed to be able to see the outside, right? You don't know who's outside.
We had no idea, based on where we were, what was going on in the street. And so they opened the gates. There were gates there. And they opened them, and just up the driveway from both directions came a sea of people. And in what felt like seconds, the building was completely full. And one other thing that I thought was fascinating, Elaine and I and Steve went over to, for those of you who remember the Mirage well enough, when you walk in and you see the rainforest, there are also some pillars, stone-covered pillars there. And we just sort of stood alongside it because Elaine said, I just want to see their reaction. I just want to see what happens.
Sure.
And the first group of people who walked in stopped, looked up at the rainforest, and just started to applaud. And it's giving me chills now remembering it. It was such a, it was like the first natural response. It was the first time we'd seen it, you know, that wasn't us taking someone on a tour.
And I think also now I think we're so accustomed to casinos having that certain presence when you walk in on the Las Vegas Boulevard. Almost every casino has a certain theme, a certain presence, this awe-inspiring experience when you walk in the door. But that really wasn't the case back then, for the most part. And so you can imagine how, whether it was locals or tourists or whatever, would walk in and see, why is there a rainforest in the middle of the desert? Why are there tigers? Where are the dolphins? How unusual that all was. Which gets to the next question of the effect of the Mirage on the Strip. Soon after it opened, we had Excalibur, MGM Grand, or the MGM Resorts opened, a whole host of new ones. Treasure Island, obviously right next door, was obviously very themed. It still is. What do you see as the impact of the Mirage on Las Vegas Boulevard and the valley itself?
I think that it represented the first truly integrated resort. And that relates to the business of the Mirage. It needed to make $1 million a day in revenue in order to be profitable. it made 2. So, when people began to see that, this crazy business model all of a sudden made sense. And Excalibur was already underway, just so we're clear about this. I mean, it wasn't that the rest of the industry waited for the Mirage to open and then said, all right, let's do this and let's do that, because the folks at Circus Enterprises were already underway with Excalibur. But what followed was unprecedented, and frankly, in human history. There is no city in the world that has grown the way Las Vegas has, transformed itself the way Las Vegas has through the next 2 decades, really 3 decades after the Mirage. And that had to do with pointing to a different kind of a business plan where these wow moments, you just needed to have a series of wow moments, beginning with walking in the front door. In fact, beginning with being on the Strip and just looking at the volcano going, wow, this is crazy.
Well, and also I think that, I remember when my family moved here in '95, that was the first place we went was the Mirage because my sister and I wanted to see the dolphins. And the idea of making Las Vegas more family friendly was sort of a novel concept at the time, new concept at the time.
I think we've got to be very careful about how we talk about this family-friendly idea. The family-friendly idea took root when the MGM Grand opened with the theme park.
That's a good
point. And they
yeah.
were very specific that they were trying to attract families. From that perspective, that was an abysmal failure. Las Vegas is not a family destination in the same way that Orlando or San Diego or any number of other cities are family destinations. Las Vegas is the place where you don't bring the kids. Las Vegas is the place that you get to be a kid again.
True. I think I'm referencing specifically an interview that Channel 8 did with Steve Wynn, and he hinted at the idea that, the shows would be, you could bring your kids to the shows, hypothetically, things along you wouldn't obviously bring them to the casino floor, but that there were things you wouldn't be dissuaded necessarily from bringing your kids along hypothetically if that happened.
That related to trying to get the image of Las Vegas softened up a little bit for people who travel. But the interest in the consumer that we were targeting were people who travel.
Of course.
And here's an interesting stat that sort of has gotten lost in history. In the 80s, there was a big accounting firm called Arthur Andersen, and they had done a study of travel habits in the U.S. And they asked people who had taken a trip in the prior 12 months if they'd gone to Las Vegas. And then they asked whether or not they'd even considered Las Vegas. And 15% of the people they spoke to had either been to or considered Las Vegas. We knew we needed to expand that group so that at the very least, we're in the discussion.
Yeah.
And for some folks, they are going to travel with their kids. And by the way, let's not ignore the region, right? You come to Las Vegas for a couple of days and then head up to Zion and Bryce. Sure. It's an incredible, the Grand Canyon, it's an incredible experience to have with your kids. But maybe Vegas is the starting or stopping point for a trip like that. We didn't want there to be a sign on the city that literally said adults only. Right. But that's very different from saying we are trying to attract families. That didn't take root, as I say, until the MGM opened, and it was very short-lived because, let's face it, Las Vegas does not compete as a family destination. No. Las Vegas is a party town.
Yeah.
Las Vegas is where it comes
That's
to
the idea,
celebrate.
anyway.
Well, yeah, whether or not you individually come to party, you're coming here as an adult to let loose a little bit. Whether it's a family celebration, a reunion, a graduation, a wedding, a divorce, whatever it may be, you're coming for a reason to let loose a bit.
Yeah. And
that's different than having a theme park.
So the Mirage opens, it's a success. Obviously, you work for the company, you said, obviously for decades. And other properties open along Las Vegas Boulevard. And what would you say is the thread between, obviously there's a direct one between Mirage and Treasure Island right next door, but eventually Steve Wynn goes to the Bellagio. Then, of course, there's the Wynn and Encore resorts as well. Is there a thread that runs between them aside from the fact that Steve Wynn was involved in them all?
I think there's a thread that runs through many of the properties here. Part of it is exactly what we've spoken about already, which is the idea that there are a series of wow moments that need to happen. It needs to evolve and kind of
It's a story.
yeah, exactly. It's like telling a story. But it also relates to how you treat your employees. And this is where Elaine Wynn was very strategic and very much part of the management team, was Mirage employees we tried to make them feel special. You know, for Mirage Resorts, that it kind of evened out to treat everyone well, to give everyone an opportunity to grow and thrive. And as you look up and down the Strip today, I don't think there's a property that doesn't have someone who used to work at the Mirage. I even know of a couple people here at Channel 8 who used to work at the Mirage.
I'm not sure who you could possibly be referring to. Maybe behind the screens there, the
Maybe
camera.
over there. Yeah, trying to hide.
Final question for you, as someone who worked at the Mirage for such a long time, with the company for such a long time. Obviously now that property, it's changed hands several times, of course, and now it's under this huge reconstruction process into the Hard Rock. You can drive along the Strip and see the bottom of a guitar now on Las Vegas Boulevard. What were your thoughts when, and I think we spoke when the Mirage closed, when the Mirage finally did close its doors, and as it's undergoing this transformation, your thoughts watching it from afar?
I think it's exactly what Las Vegas has thrived on and built its success on for all of these years. Las Vegas thrives because of change, not in spite of it. We don't hang on to things, and I know that makes history buffs like Bob Stoddall nuts.
Well, you're on a history podcast, just for the record.
And the reason I bring it up is that it's, you know, we do want to value our history, but if we hang on to it too much, it becomes stale. And the thing that has driven Las Vegas and its success and its growth and its sustainability has been change. In fact, on the day the Mirage opened, we even talked about that. And we said that Vegas thrives because of change. And you know, there was some controversy as a lot of the other hotels. Look, there used to be a Desert Inn. There used to be a Sahara. There used to be, well, there's
Dunes,
still
Frontier.
a Sahara, but the Dunes, the
old
Frontier, the Sands, the Aladdin.
You go through the whole list.
Right. And we have to be comfortable letting go of some of that because what comes next is likely going to be better. And I have no doubt that that's going to be the case with Hard Rock. And I appreciate you referring to it as reconstruction. That place is being reimagined. Yeah. They are going through every square inch of it and rethinking what those experiences are going to be when you arrive at the Hard Rock. And, you know, now you're arriving with this unbelievably stunning guitar. I mean, it's
very interesting
that you can stay in. I mean, it's wild.
Well, I appreciate, Alan, you taking the trip back in time, looking back. I mean, Mirages are designed to disappear, and I guess it's not disappearing, as we're talking about, it's being reconstructed into the Hard Rock. Alan, thank you for this trip back in time here on 8 News Then. I really appreciate it.
It's been fun. Thank you, John.
And join us on another episode of 8 News Then right here on 8 News Now. Thanks for watching.